Many of you will remember Knowing Time by Light that they did together in 2010. And now we have Lessons in Disappearance, which is also the title poem in this new collection. I've known and admired Joel and Dave for such a long time, and as you look around you can see why. Excuse me. As educators and artists, they hold two of the most esteemed roles in civilized society, in my opinion. Please join me now as we listen to Joel Long read from 7 poems and 7 paintings, and then he'll be joined at the podium by Dave Hall.
Are you going to come up after? No, I'm just going to relax. Just take it easy. Relax, and I won't. I'll try to. All right. Welcome. What a wonderful thing to have you all out here. Can you hear me in the back okay? Because I hear myself really well, which sometimes is disconcerting, but that's okay. I'm so thrilled to be here. I'm so thrilled to have such a huge audience for this, and honestly, it kind of freaks me out. But we're really happy. We've been working hard to get this exhibit together and to get this book together. I couldn't be more grateful to Dave Hall than I am right now. He's put together 2 books. He's brought my poems out so that people can actually read them. I read them on my computer every once in a while, but to have them in a book form and to have you be able to read them is a great treat and an honor. And it makes those hours sitting in front of the computer screen wondering what line is next worth it. So thank you, Dave, so much. And it's been an honor, of course, to look at his paintings over the years, too. These last 4 years, I've spent a lot of time in Montana, and the mind that Dave Hall sees Montana with my home state, and I'm surrounded by it. There's music. Does anybody else hear that, or is that just me? Sometimes my muse sounds just like that. You don't hear anything, Joel. Oh, kooky, that's what he is. I'm going to read a couple of poems from the first book that Dave and I put together called Knowing Time by Light, and I'm going to read the title poem to start with. I'm going to put on my glasses so I can see. I'm describing myself as if I'm narrating suddenly, and it's very strange. I'll just read poems from now. Knowing Time by Light. Land, let us know time by the angle light hits. Sundial of hills and gullies, barb of the ridgeline, breath drop and shadow. Take enough distance inside to last the dark, blue-gray shade of hesitant cloud at the plain's edge, autumn cool. If land is flat, I spread directions, distance mind in feathers of earth, yellow, black iridescence, raven's tail. In this light, nothing is flat. I catch fissures and coulees, weightless, finding ground. Dusk, I relish its pulse, sky pressure pushing a cold palm, the half shell of silt blue catching intent, turning it vapor, brief atoms of joy. Nothing quiet here, everything makes noise. Even stones beneath the field shift. Take the body of evening, heavy as being, gilded, fringed with brilliance that makes me believe the heart of things, the kind of heft we can almost bear. It's a poem called Rediscovered Book of Hours. I'm reading this tonight for our friend Dwayne Huntsman, who allowed us to be in Briggs, a beautiful, beautiful place. Rediscovered Book of Hours. On the Antiques Roadshow, the man wants to know what they're worth. 2 pages from a book of hours, small as a paperback from the thrift store, jewels with the brushstroke of a nameless master, 1 panel. Christ entering Jerusalem, the expert explains. Before Christ is accused, before he is sacrificed, the triumph of palm and exaltation, the face of compassion hovering above the well-observed donkey. And the other, from a separate story, the death of the Virgin surrounded by apostles, the gravity of their sorrow. She is so still, after all, mysterious in death, always surprise, even to these so near the sacred, still living, the limit of knowledge, her beautiful face, a locked door. On the missing panel, perhaps the artist depicted her assumption, the imagined descent, having seen birds lifted by updraft, the way the sky towers in clouds and late light. But the remaining hour, the devotion here, she is dead, laid flat in her bed, beautiful but common, and they are common in their grief. The expert said, there is some smudging of paint at key spots where the supplicant has touched over and over some object on the page. Mantle of the Virgin, feet of Christ. The paint is worn down to an underlayer, what the painter intended to be hidden. Unmodeled swath of blue, drop of gold or red. They touched the image and said the prayer for the hour of the day. Which hour for death? Must it be dusk or the hour after? Could it be as simple as morning, wakened by the cry of sandhill cranes that vanish when I open the door? Could I say prayer as I rub my finger against her dress, say, I trusted her death in a morning so vast, this creek mending meadow with cool thread to the river we haven't seen? The car stirs dust on the dirt road like a zipper undoing the tail of a dust bird. Here is the missing page, I say, the unwritten prayer, unchanted by the acolyte, who has not lifted his hand to this particular light to touch the painted surface of these hills. The cutting swallows, sapphire wings, curved blades of the lesser moon, the wasp tapping its gut on the back of my hand. The missing hour needs new prayer, needs this object of devotion to rub our skin. The willow with its root in water, red-winged blackbird chipping stones against blue. I am here to receive it, to chant in this hall of sky incense of the sun heat, chant to the center of the hour, the hinge and hub around which it flourishes and sustains. Chant to the center, the coldest water, too clear to see. There's some poems from Lessons in Disappearance. It's so pretty. Thank you, Dave. Because Dave decorates my books. It's beautiful. He makes them beautiful. Makes me want to write another poem. What fun. So I'll read some of the poems that are around you, but I'll allow you to do some of that yourself. But I want to sort of give you a characterization of the book as I read tonight, and then we'll be done, and we can drink wine and eat crackers with beautiful tip. I'll read this one. Shaking baskets in the market. Let me read aloud again the story of the beginning of the world. How surprised I'll be when it happens. Darkness we cannot know, silence like fossils, the will with the force of planets, stars, pelicans. I will say out loud, participate with reading glasses, my slow speech, my inexact pronunciation. You may ask me to repeat a phrase, a whole passage to clarify. Perhaps you will just find some phrase so musical, so astonishing you will want to be sure you heard it correctly, that I had not somehow in my ecstasy reading words of origin misspoken a word from the formation of the root, the beet, the turnip, the first waters, their learning sound, how spray felt for the first hand, realizing it could feel the spray, and the feel of the page which was yet to be created, the bark of the tree, the pulp of the grasses rising from the beginning of the water, and the nascent sun that just was learning to shine, what it felt like to shine onto the earth that soon would learn time and beauty and the long drone of sorrow stirring the blossoms, blossoming brevity, scent, and permanent glow. And then there's the upper meadow, which is right back there, but it looks really blurry. Much better like that. This is called the upper meadow, with the epigraph from Regina Dereva. Says, so many visitors have walked through me, dark and light, depending on the illumination. A basin of wind strikes sparks, wind-colored, sun-dimmed, a tawny hum. I part, weeds part. Tassel brewer's daughter comb the brown mold. I raise the rim of the sky, its low limit and muddle it closed. Let sky move through me, mimic me in its mirror and the flies, night moths drifting down. If I let waters come, they come through me. Some lesser light, threading skin and cold, motion like falling sleep. Vanishing trees keep me hidden like memory, a sliver of some day held, nearly still, a place you were walking, cricket note, black-winged slade. You never remember what you said exactly, only scent, tea, plum, cinnamon dissolves your tongue. A couple years ago, for the first time, I went to Mount Timpanogos, not Mount Timpanogos, but Timpanogos Cave. Roxanne was there. Fiona was here this afternoon to hear this. And this is what came out of it. It's called I'm Visiting Timpanogos Cave. Clever. Thank you very much. Yeah. Water comes down from the fracture bearing a calcite lash. It is not coming down for you. Not to be red like certain flowers are red, though flowers will claim indifference too. Forget-me-not, penstemon, scarlet gilia, goat's head. But here, rangers call it the heart, stalactite, sheer enough to let light through, drapery fold, gown of the misplaced goddess. They call it heart. It looks like a heart, hidden the way the heart is in darkness a million years. And dread makes us think the little time to form this fin, size of the body, backlit, pulse in geologic time, and water dripping. The guide turns out the light. We know that beauty not meant for us, not this, not just this, none of it meant for us. Time is filled with darkness. This cave, the pressure of the mountain above, our little minds drift inside the mountain. Their visions of bridges, peacocks, and clouds. In darkness, the tour guide insists upon, we are dust motes in the morning of my childhood, small hands of an infant lost 1810. Purple aster on the cliffside no one dares to climb. Cave with no entrance. Temple of white crystal. The nonchalant gods care nothing for worship. They do not wish to be known, but become the beauty with no one looking. Just so quiet. Just cough or something. You're making me nervous. It's called sleeping still. Sleeping still. I hold you in dreams, impossible sky, the branch of a bright tree, folded leaves. In my arms, you wander in another world, make living things inside, cats and swans, plants, swans become, flying machines, blue marionettes, antelope skin and rain. Your body is the rumor of you. You reel, you fraction of morning, rising dust of it. Weight of my hands, weight of two shoulders, head propped on the pillow. I am air, quicksilver dream outside you. You breathe, bellow warm, cloud 3 hands above your floor.
How can I contain you, but hold you? Hold the base of your head where the whole river storms from headwaters to the unexplored sea, where the map dissolves in tea and snow. They speak language there of black pebbles and soot. You recognize their street signs. You know who lives in the tiny lace house with the shutters drawn and wind chimes shaped like bronze bats and mist. Who sits in the chair by the stove with wooden toys and spectacles, or smells and sounds the mark on that train. The body's borders are quaint now. My arms around your head, a glass nest inverted, and every candle you've ever lit now in you. And you dream there like a prayer, eyes closed, their own replica, your breath, the footfalls from morning, lone. A guess of primrose, thin as dawn, thin as the room in which I wait, coming to your dreaming, to the sky I cannot leap through. New constellations, several moons, there and there. You say you call it soft names. Sometimes I call it moonflower, since it blooms in the dark and breeds fruit that some call poison. Sometimes I call it man who lives in the house with no windows, who we hear from time to time from the street, shuffling over antique floors in his worn slippers. He seems to limp. We cannot see him. We continue to sweep the gutters of debris. No one knows why his house smells like jasmine in the last snowstorm. Sometimes I call it ripe peach. Sometimes I call it smoke. It responds by drifting from the vent. Sometimes I call it trunkload of sea sand, each grain a mirror with which it sees itself going away. I feel sand sifting when I move, when I stop suddenly. I nearly fall forward onto the street where the debris was swept. Sometimes I call it darling. I say, don't go. Stay inside, where I call it little bird with the perfect beak and talons hanging onto the branch of shadow. Thunderheads teach the trees to billow. It's that painting right there. I hope I'm pointing the right direction. I feel a little bit like I'm pinning the tail of a donkey when I have reading glasses on. If I do that to one of your paintings, Dave, I'm sorry. Right there. Oops. It's called Thunderheads Teach the Trees to Billow, with the epigraph from Ivor Winters. We fed our minds on every mortal thing. We smooth each tree to soft and subtle things, capable of saints and angels, leaves and twigs. The flies weave lucid beams, carry canopies, these billowing sheets of breath and brain. Knowing world wavers, knowing light this brief, we walk our skins so lit from grasses, thunderheads, some motion and shadow nested inside us, the call we do not recognize, music, a cry, 6 bright coins arrayed from several empires with separate fires and ore. Each grass gives color, copper, brass, gold, and teal, gives sound, shuffling, winnowed grain. We are textured, germ, center of seed, pulse. I see clouds in every snow. I see your hand brush the ridgeline. The branches of cottonwood, small waters in bright darkness, surprising us as we step through it all, cool, singing the nerves of our heels, the sensation. We live together in this world, choose daily love. This is called Disembark. Boat sorrow, I lift you. I hold you in sky. I move, you move with me toward the bend of trees with falling light, a harbor of gold broken leaves. Boat coals burn miracle. Some float by will of water that bears them up as I do, that holds them to the bank of stems, bangles of fireweed, lamps that rattle light above the shore, pull ash to dry shimmer, cataracts hung on reeds. Lanterns burn the solemn rust, swing their way to water, the morning a scarf of apricot, sown through night trees, where I will find you, floating in the nectar of better, sweeter, combed by black willows and thyme. Back when I lived in Colorado, on the South Platte, runs outside of Greeley, and if you walk out there, you would see these lumbering carp hanging out at the bottom of the water. You can see, so they were just down there sucking on mud, doing what carp do, and just these giant. I mean, they were practically like cows with fins, and so I wrote them a song called Carp Song. Before it is too late, remember the carp in the bottom of the river, hanging like river weeds, lethargic and huge. I won't say they are fluid as water, won't. They are big stones, algae slick. It is not winter. There is no memory of ice for water. They do not imagine rigidity, but the carp stayed down anyway. They stayed down in silky mud, the net of their bodies catching the dim light that weathers water to spark their scales. They do not hear magpies squawking above. They do not see the owl spreading twilight with its vacant wings as it crosses the river. The swollen carp anchored in the earth below, weighed by water. Before it is too late, acknowledge the beauty of the dome speck of being, trollfish, shimmering toward darkness, closer to silence than you are. This one, behind me, where's it? Drinking tea, where's drinking tea? Okay, oh, right over here. I was talking about this one earlier. Last year I got re-obsessed with Shakespeare for a while, and I was just constantly reading Shakespeare. I couldn't get enough of it. I was teaching it to my students at school and reading it in my bedstand and all sorts of stuff. And one night I was with Roxanne, and I got to get a poem out tonight because that's what I do. I couldn't have to write poems. And so I went downstairs and wrote this poem. And then I looked at it and I thought, yeah, it's 14 lines. That's weird. And then I started looking at it. I was like, weird. This is like this iambic pentameter. And then I started to tinker with it, and it's basically a sonnet. And I didn't know that I was writing a sonnet. It was very strange. Anyway, so that's how this poem came about. It's called Drinking Tea to Be Like Grass. It's from Dave's Pain. In morning now I drink my tea. I wash the color of leaves, the blood that passes translucent gold and green. And when I cross this field, I recognize my cousin, grass, familiar tint of straw, that taste. We both pass through the dust toward the cottonwoods, the river's edge, and out beyond it all into the western blur of faded clouds. I can't perceive so clear the lower mountain, so old and smooth, where I will never go. It gives its detail to the wind, its burden, and makes of air the bearer of what below the grass can never keep. And I will always just keep losing things until the vivid last. You guys are being so nice. And I really appreciate that. This is for my Roxanne. This is geologic time. Paper. We had our paper anniversary, and so look at all this paper. So that's for her. In the desert, the hull of a whale surfaces in stone. It is as textured as the present. The porous bones still porous, socket of an eye pouring with shadow. It tells us of an inland sea before man invented time, and the birds and the stones tell us of flying and sound. Stone leaves, like leaves in the gutter, shimmer tracery of opaque glass that looks straight into the pressure of the earth on the earth, pulling into its own center every kind and species. In the times of bridge building, men on girders hung above the river in its current bed like reflections off silver, bits of shaved ice floating down from the heavens. And when they came down to shore from the high scaffold, the bridge looked permanent, as though it had been there as long as the river, and the men vanished with their voices and most of their words, stones in the quarry without hammers. In the city of your birth, refineries clean the blood of ancient birds and palm groves, the scent of orchid, the smoke of ruin. The world has waited this long, swinging around the sun with slow velocity, patient for us. The bridges in every city we visited have been rising over waters, and the rivers have changed direction by wearing away granite, leaving behind oxbows and meanders from centuries of bearing down, lifting silt into itself, shining with it, laying it down softly in its bed. For us, it must be easy to wait. The earth teaches us patience, and we calmly release our love into its grace, two bodies and hearts that have waited this long for the flash, this ecstasy of sweetness. We are left to participate in this grand sweep of things, sparrows squeaking in shrubbery, thunderheads building above the butte, clouds drifting clouds of their bodies beneath cottonwood's shade, and the river renaming each stone, each meadow and sky. We are awash in all. A few more. You guys have been so nice to me, and thank you so much for coming. I have maybe 3, maybe 4, depends on how I feel. But I'll read a few. This is Dusk and Last Chance, and this is the painting back there on the wall. Beautiful orange dusk painting. And this is for Harvey Larson, who's my sister-in-law's father. Late season, the air is cold at dusk, and water moves like a cold animal shining in constant birth. The meadow breathes gold into itself as the frost comes and the geese go, silent among the gleaning. The voice of the water pours into night, and we cannot see, but know it continues when we depart, when we sleep, glimmering things in the gauzed moon autumn. We know there is something inside that flows through land, that land responds to, bearing its weight in silver speed, its wetness, resin cold, growing colder toward the weight of ice some winter still to come. Tonight it is just autumn, dissolving the river, tumbling leaves in current like they are golden acrobats who let their wills leave them for eddies, for the drip, the sparkle shooting through the white veils of water. The grasses gasp, astonished to feel water at the still base, stalks tilt, weave, biting the cut bank. If I can know water goes on, I learn what I've come here to learn. I look on the body and know water, my sister, water, my voice, turning beneath the ice. I'll read this poem that is the title poem to the book. It's called Lessons in Disappearance. The first lesson in disappearance is turn away. Second, staying with time. It will tell you. Take this field, for instance. Place it in morning, early enough for fog to stay a while. Make things vanish. It will help you to understand loss. For example, you might think of the body, someone you love, an uncle, father's brother, that. A drink in his hand, the color of this field, and cool, the ice like this fog floating smooth. He is tangible. He speaks sounds clear as grackles in the trees you cannot see, one covered in fog, for instance, for example, for it will help to know everything participates in this exercise. So pay attention to any one thing, and you will understand the lesson. Pay attention to the small detail. Lose it all. Pay attention again, the grin in pine trees, that the vapor moves to the bones of the trees. Plush needles made soft this morning, made so detailed you'd think they could never disappear, really. But they do, and they tell you so. And morning floats like soap, all the colors escaping their names as you open your mouth to say them. Say, there and there, blue-green, indigo, burn. And there, rust, ink and fire. Your uncle, your daughter, the pines and glasses. The day the lightning was the only light but blue flies. The day the fog took trees. Trees did not return. It's a poem called Miracle of Pain, after the miracle of the loaves and the fishes. It was the desert, of course, where such need multiplies. They warn us of thirst, tell us, protect yourselves, keep yourselves safe. There were 5 loaves and 2 fish, and Jesus wanted to feed them all. So when the boy came to him, Jesus blessed the food, and the disciples went among the thousands. They kept giving it away. They gave bread and fish away, and the hungry ate and ate, and they were fed, and they kept giving it away, and they were hungry, and they were fed. And when they were done, disciples filled 12 baskets with food. It had to be the desert. The desert is an expert in hunger and cruelty. When I find out from an old friend that her baby has died, I take on her grief, but her grief does not diminish. I feel that great weight, but hers grows heavier. And she has told many, and she has told hundreds. Each one feels that dark sting in every cell of their body, and their bodies are stone hammers weighted to the ground, but her own weight increases. She only sees the dark spreading out among those she loves, those who listen, and this small comfort. She sees them become just a little like herself, bearing this great grief like one of her kind, this breed of sufferers. And she is fed by this miracle, that this lament can be carried by one alone, but can feed us all. Okay. 2 more, I think. Not 3. One's really short. A couple years ago, for Roland Hall, we did an interim trip with Cody Partridge, myself, and Susie Beck, and we went down there to do art and poetry, and we had a wonderful time. And at that time, Roxanne was my fiance, and I missed her terribly. I always miss her. I'm not with her, but I missed her terribly because I was gone a week, and we didn't have much contact because, we were down by Moab and not much. So I sent her text messages here and there, and one of the text messages became this poem, and I don't know that I've changed it much. I could probably find it on my phone, but it's this poem. It's a Desert Maiden, which is a poem, a sort of a prayer. The sparrow slips among pear blossoms. The cow is lowing behind the fences. I am without you this morning, but in this blue, in this growing warmth, there is no sound that is not your name. There is no light where your name is no longer written. And then another one I get down there too, called Evening Primrose. Bone petals, ear translucent, someone put the sun in its feathered heart. What matters but to bloom in darkness, to bloom in spite of darkness, burst in softness out of the peach rock and sand? Sure to blow around in wind like silk rags, they tether to the puckered earth where the root anchors the pinprick at its center. Outside, the vast, but this small thing, brief in this wind, shadings of white light, litters the desert. Let larkspur bloom for days in their towers and vertical clusters of fruit whose only sweetness comes in a future of blue, in a taste of grass and cool. The primrose lies low to the ground, some comfort in flatness that resembles repose, something in being so thin a thing that light passes through you and does not complain that it is so slightly altered. The way breath shifts when it turns to prayer, which turns into what? Something thinner. And one more. Thank you so much for coming tonight. And tonight when we're done, I think Dave's going to step up, and if people want to ask questions about our collaboration or anything else, we'll be glad to answer it. And make sure to look at the paintings. And Dave has paintings all through the back there. There's a beautiful Bahamas painting that you got to look at in the back. So please do that, and thanks again for coming. And this is the last poem in the book, called Birds in the Secret Dawn. Only the birds know the time. No dawn comes from the soft shoes water sees through. They know because they sing it in the shadows of Mormon tea, in the scrub oak, in the willows. Know because their bones hold the weight of dawn, because coming, so they recognize it as kind. And flight is just another kind of dawn, though louder, pushing air aside to leave behind the water, necklace with its jewels faceted of horse grass, sedge, and light soaking over the edge of pines, announcing itself on the undersides of complacent clouds. The birds know, but will not tell you. Do not speak a language that was meant to tell you anything, but pronounce it with light, a chorus of nonsense made beautiful by nonsense and change, muskrat, plunging in current, a gong in the ghost monastery.
As Joel said, we're going to have a little Q&A, but I wanted to just say a couple words about how this all started. First of all, I want to thank Glenda and Jim Bradley for opening their doors. This all started about 5 years ago, and Joel and I became friends and got to know each other first when our son Brooks took Joel's art history class at Roland Hall, and we would sit during that year at home over dinner and listen and look at the big art history book and talk about art history and what Joel was teaching the class. And I kid Joel about the fact that it's his fault that Brooks, who's now a junior at Wake Forest, is majoring in, guess what, art history.
Yeah, I inspire art historians and writers, two lucrative careers.
And then about that time, I had a show at Phillips Gallery, and the title of the show was Moving Water. And I was a couple of days away from a big birthday, and Joel showed up at the show with a beautiful poem called Moving Water, and with a little note on it wishing me a happy birthday. And we agreed that night, 2009 I think it was, that we were going to work together. And this is the third year that we've done this in the second book, and it's been wonderful.
Indeed, yeah.
So I don't know if you have any questions, but if you do, we'd be happy to answer a few, and then we can enjoy what Glenda has prepared over here. Peter?
Do you write poems looking at Dave's paintings? And then, Dave, have you ever made a painting reading one of Joel's poems?
We've done 3 shows, so there have been 21
paintings and 21 poems that have been in the 3 shows. And I would say most of them, all but 3 or 4, have gone from my painting and then Joel interpreting the painting into a poem. This year, we did, there are a couple, this one over here, Dawn Requiem.
Well, let's get a read that, shoot. I forgot, sorry.
Dawn Requiem was done in the other direction. There was the poem, Joel really wanted it in the show, and we didn't have a painting for it, so that was done in response to the poem. The Upper Meadow in the back, right by Lori, hi Lori, was done from the poem. Let's see, Winter River, right here, was done this year from the poem. So most of it has been in Joel interpreting the painting, but I think in the future we're going to do more of me interpreting his poetry. Thank you for coming.
Thank you so much.
I'm sorry.
Do you ever change your poems, Joe?
What do you mean?
Well, you look at the picture, you do your poem. Do you reinterpret the picture and therefore reinterpret your poem?
I guess it depends. I mean, like when I'm reading out loud or when I'm...
To yourself, as you're creative.
Yeah, you know, I've got such a poor memory that every time I read my poems, it's like somebody else's poem. So, I think I'm joking, it's hilarious, but it's kind of true. It's nice because it's like, hey, that's a pretty good line. It's like, who wrote that? That's pretty good. In some ways, that's true. So it does become sort of new every time that I read it, to a certain extent. And I discover what I was finding in the process of writing the poem. I mean, and not to be coy about it, when I write poems, there is an aspect where I'm discovering something that I didn't know that I had to say. There is a nice quality of that where I don't feel like they're my poems exactly. They sort of come through me. And in collaboration with Dave, I mean, I'll look at his paintings for a long time and wait for lines to come. I don't know where they come from. And I'm happy when that's the case. If I am laboring to find the lines, it probably means that I have something to say, and that's probably not going to be as interesting as what I discover to say as I write the poem.
Yes.
Well,
Kristen?
the words and the painting, they seem to kind of mesh so well. I'm just wondering, would it even be remotely possible to collaborate with a poet that was way different? You know, whose language was different, whose rhythm was different? Was this just this natural thing that came together, you both?
I don't know if you all could hear the question, but Kristen's question was, is it possible, I guess you're wondering why it is that we connect, and is it possible for any poet to connect with any painter and vice versa? I think the answer is absolutely no. And I think one of the reasons that Joel and I have really connected in this effort has to do with the fact that a little piece of the world that I love is a stretch of the Missouri River north of Helena between Wolf Creek and Craig. I do a fair amount of fishing. And over the last 30 years, I've spent a lot of mornings standing in that section of the river. And Joel grew up in Great Falls, which is just downriver. So he knows that country. We both know that country. And I think that's where it comes from. I think it's a really good question, Kristen. I don't think it can work. In this case, it has, and it's a pleasure. But I think it doesn't often work. Yeah.
Yeah, I'll say a few things about that too. I think that the place where we grow up becomes the landscape of our consciousness, and metaphor comes about in delving into that deeper level. When I think of my hometown, when I drive through that stretch of river, I am home, and I'm home in so many different levels. And so when I start to look at Dave's paintings, I enter this place where metaphor, I don't want to say it becomes easy, because writing is not easy ever, but it's familiar in the sense that it starts speaking to me in the language of my home. And that, I think that worked with the poems, and that's one of the reasons that our collaboration has worked so well.
It's a good question. Yes?
How long does it take you to paint your paintings?
The question is, how long does it take me to do the paintings? And it really varies. It really varies, and I find, and I suspect this is true of most artists, visual artists or poets, whatever, but the ones that I'm most pleased with go the fastest. And the ones that I tend to labor over, pick at, look at details, are the ones that oftentimes end up in the corner of the studio and don't go anywhere. So it really varies from hours to days and weeks. And then there's one I'm working on in my studio right now that sat over in a corner for over a year. And one day I walked in and looked at it, and I sort of hit me what I needed to do with it. So.
Is your work exclusively landscape, or is it just this exhibit?
No, I do exclusively landscapes, and I rarely go, well, I can't think of a painting where I've gone south from here. I do landscapes, and most of them are southwest Montana, Yellowstone Park, and the big one back there is of the Bahamas, and it's a completely different palette, so it was fun to do. I had to sort of think a lot about the paint mixing on that one. But no, I've really focused in on a part of the country, part of the world that just moves me for what, it relates to where you grew up. And while I didn't grow up in this area, that part of the world I'm in love with. And so I work on pieces that come from that area.
Yeah, John. Joel, do you have an answer to the question that they often ask poets? How do you know when your poem is done?
I suppose that the standard answer is you never know, probably never done exactly. But in some ways, I think of it visually. I think about, a great Cézanne still life, where every piece of fruit and every ladyfinger is set up exactly the way that the canvas is supposed to behave. And so I want language on the page to have that sort of faceting that Cézanne's pictures have. When you see a Cézanne in person, for instance, there's something almost like an organic living thing that sits in front of you. And I want the language on the page to do that, so that every little facet, every shimmer of light from that language creates the whole of the composition and feels like a living thing in some way. And then any part that should be left out is left out, and any part that should be in is in its appropriate place. And when that happens, I do think that it becomes a sort of almost like an animal, a sort of living, breathing thing. I hope that happens in some of the poems. That's what I try to do. When I revise, I am constantly tinkering with the line break, how long that sentence should be, should that word be in there, should it not, until it has that sense of cohesion and really creates something living, I hope.
Peter?
Have you guys ever thought of doing a kind of a creative, conceptual nucleus road trip thing, where you go out together and sit on a common point and share your palette of color and your palette of work?
I think we're both too busy.
In lots of ways, that's true. We may try to meet up in Great Falls. We're going to see.
We've talked about doing this show some year in Bozeman or Great Falls or something like that. But yeah, no, we're both pretty busy, but we find the time to do this because we really enjoy it. We really enjoy it a lot.
Andrew.
If we enjoyed Joel Long poems, what other poets should we be reading?
That's a pretty good question. Poets that constantly inspire me, I'll start with one of my standbys is Rilke, Rainer Maria Rilke, the great German poet. I'm inspired by Charles Wright all the time. I'm inspired, and you would not notice it in my poems, but Lucy Brock-Roydo is a wonderful poet. Who else should go? Well, one that I've been rereading and going back to because I think that she has spiritual things to say that are wonderful is Mary Oliver. I read a book called Thirst last summer that completely captivated me, and some of these poems in this book are inspired by that. And I'll tell you more. I'll lend you some. So if there are no more questions, there might be more questions. You can ask us more questions, but questions are better with wine. So please have some wine, have some sparkling water, whatever you're drinking, and thank you so much for coming.